Hello everyone! With Arlecchino's kit finally being revealed in the official Genshin 4.6 livestream, her crazy beta cycle is at its end. She had received a lot of drastic changes every week during her beta, probably the most that any character has gotten in any beta ever, and I've covered and analyzed pretty much all the changes on my channel already. However, understanding Arlecchino can get quite confusing if you haven't closely followed every change or just haven't gotten up to speed with the latest news. So I wanted to make one last updated guide explaining how Arlecchino works, the best way to build her, her potential best teams, and analyzing her place in the meta in terms of overall strength and pull value. There are a lot of Arlecchino guides out there, and although I don't personally see myself as a theory crafter, I've closely followed theory crafting communities for years, and I wanted to provide a character guide that has simple and practical explanations while also giving more detailed analysis that is backed by TC. So with that, let's get right into it. Arlecchino is a 5-star Pyro Polar main DPS that ascends with crit rate. The simplest way to describe Arlecchino's overall playstyle is that she is a melee modernized Yoimiya, as she is a normal attack focused character. Arlecchino's entire kit revolves around the Bond of Life mechanic, which is shown as a red outline around your health bar. All you need to know about this relatively rare mechanic is that normally you want to remove Bond of Life by healing, but with Arlecchino she wants to maintain Bond of Life as it is her main source of damage. The more Bond of Life she has, the more damage she deals. To ensure she doesn't heal off her Bond of Life, her passive talent makes it so that in combat she cannot be healed by any means other than her own ult, in addition to gaining 40% pyro damage bonus. With the inability of getting healed by teammates, Arlecchino has an inherently high risk, high reward playstyle that rewards players with higher skill. To help her with her survivability, Arlecchino's A4 talent gives her physical and elemental resistance based on her attack. To reach the cap of 20% resistance, you'll need 3000 attack. This makes Arlecchino, an attack scaler that doesn't build defensive stats, pretty much as tanky as a DPS that scales off of a defensive stat like HP, such as Hu Tao. So a pretty nice passive to help her survivability. Arlecchino's entire kit revolves around Bond of Life, so how do you get it? To answer this question, let's start with explaining her skill. She does a small dash and cleave hitting nearby enemies. It does decent damage, but the important thing is that it applies a dot called Blood Depth Directive onto enemies hit by her skill. If Arlecchino provides a charged attack onto an enemy with Blood Depth Directive immediately, she removes the dot and gains 65% Bond of Life. With her A1 talent, however, if you wait at least 5 seconds for the Blood Depth Directive to remain on the enemy and then charged attack, Arlecchino gains 130% Bond of Life instead. An enemy dying with the Blood Depth also gives 130% Bond. Each skill use can give a maximum of 145% Bond, making it so that getting 2 Blood Directives after 5 seconds from 2 enemies doesn't give you the 200% cap of Bond of Life, just 145%. This skill has a long cooldown of 30 seconds, but it won't be that long because of her normal talent. There are 3 key things to know about her normal talent. First, when Arlecchino has greater than or equal to 30% Bond of Life, she enters an enhanced state called Mask of the Red Death. During this enhanced state, Arlecchino has a pyro infusion and her normal attacks, not charged or plunged attacks, have a buffed multiplier. This buffed multiplier scales on the amount of Bond of Life Arlecchino has. For instance, if Arlecchino has 100% Bond of Life, then 100% multiplied by the Mask of the Red Death increase, which is 238% at talent level 10, equals 238%. This 238% is added to the motion value to any of the 6 hits of her normals. Because of this, the normal attack buff and thus Bond of Life is the majority of Arlecchino's damage. Second important thing, every time Arlecchino hits with an enhanced infused normal attack, her Bond of Life decreases by 7.5% of her current Bond of Life. Ultimately, this makes her damage very front-loaded, which is a good thing. Here is a sheet I made visualizing exactly how the amount of Bond of Life and normal attack multiplier buff changes as she hits an enemy at C0. The last important thing is that each enhanced infused normal hit on an enemy reduces the cooldown of her skill by 0.8 seconds. This means that if you hit an enemy 15 times, her skill cooldown reduces to 18 seconds, which is a much more normal cooldown for a regular rotation. And one final tangent, if you hold down the charged attack button, Arlecchino can fly for 5 seconds, very cool. The last part of her kit is her ultimate. Aside from having one of the coolest animations in the game, it does 3 main things. First, it's a simple nuke. Second, it provides Arlecchino with her only source of healing in combat. And lastly, the ultimate resets her skill cooldown, absorbs any Blood Death Directives on enemies, and clears any Bond of Life on Arlecchino. Because of this last clause, you don't want to ult while doing your on-field normal attacks with Arlecchino, but at the start or end of a rotation. In addition, because the ultimate clears Bond of Life, you do have the option of just not using your ult. And because Arlecchino's enhanced normals stop at 30% bond, you can start your second rotation with an extra 30% bond at minimum if you don't ult, thus dealing more damage. This again fits in her design with high risk, high reward gameplay, as not ulting means no healing. But if you are able to survive and are fine not seeing the beautiful animation, you can theoretically get more damage from not ulting. In normal practice, however, I think ulting every other rotation will be more of the norm. With her kit explanations out of the way, what does this mean for her Arlecchino's overall gameplay? The general idea and execution is pretty simple. We want to start with Arlecchino's skill, apply Blood Debt Directive onto enemies, and allow 5 seconds to pass so that Arlecchino can get 130% Bond of Life. If her ultimate is up, you can skill into ult into skill to fit in some extra damage, healing, and energy generation. During this waiting time, we can switch to her teammates and set up their skills and bursts. After the teammates set up, then we can switch back to Arlecchino, charge the attack to get the Bond of Life, then go ham with her normal attacks. Her best combo will be spamming 3 normals into a dash attack and 3D, but if you just want to spam normals without thinking until her power of fusion is gone, that's fine too. After her on fielding is gone, you loop back to the start of the rotation. Next, let's go over her Constellations. Overall, her Constellations are quite strong, which seem to be the pattern for newly released characters. Her C1 adds 100% to the Mask of the Red Death multiplier buff on normal attacks, along with giving Arlecchino some resistance to interruption while she's attacking with her infused enhanced normals. The resistance to interruption is nice and can help enable shieldless teams, but the multiplier buff to normals is what makes this Constellation really strong. C2 makes it so that you don't have to wait 5 seconds to get the full Bond of Life from her skill's Blood Debt Directive. It also adds a big nuke when Arlecchino consumes the Blood Debt and gains Bond of Life. With C2, you don't have to Arlecchino skill, then switch to supports to wait 5 seconds. Instead, you can do your support setup first, then just go ham on Arlecchino. C3 gives her normal attack 3 levels, which is very nice. C4 reduces her ultimate cooldown by 2 seconds and gives Arlecchino 15 energy when she consumes a Blood Debt Directive from her skill to get Bond of Life. This is decent, but stronger when you consider her C6. C5 gives her ult 3 levels, which is alright, but again, more potent because of her C6. And lastly, C6 makes Arlecchino's ultimate a super nuke and gives her crit rate and crit damage to her normal attacks and ultimate after she uses her skill. For those of you aiming to C6 her, she'll pretty much solo anything with her C6. If you're not going to fully whale for her, but still want to vertically invest a little bit more into Arlecchino, in my opinion, C1 will give you the biggest value in terms of damage compared to other pulls such as getting her signature weapon. Speaking of weapons, let's cover her best weapon options. Her signature is still her best. It ultimately gives her crit rate, 36% damage bonus, and an extra 25% Bond of Life. And while C1 is technically better, her signature gives her the ability to hold a real scythe while attacking, so it has the drip factor. For other 5-star options, the biggest winner here is the Primordial Jade Spear, giving crit and attack percent. However, other 5-star spears such as Homa, Staffa, Scarlet Stance, Vortex Vanquisher, and Calamity Queller are all fine stat stick options. For her 4-star weapon options, both Battle Pass weapons will be her best weapons. Deathmatch will be better for general use, while Ballad of the Fjords is only for vape teams. You can also consider Dragon's Bane for vape teams, but it will generally be worse. For free-to-play weapons, Mist of Windspear and White Tassel are fine options. For artifacts, her best set will be the Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy, the one new artifact set coming to patch 4.6. This set is tailor-made for her, gives 18% attack and 54% damage bonus. This set is quite better than other artifact sets, so you'll want to farm this set if you want to optimize your Arlecchino. While you're farming that artifact set, or if you don't want to bother farming that domain, then 4-piece Gladiator will be your best option, giving 18% attack and 35% normal attack damage percent. And you'll farm this set normally from killing bosses to level your characters. Other options include 4-piece Gilded for vape, 4-piece Crimson Witch, and 2-piece 2-piece. For artifact stats, you'll want to go Attack Pyro Crit for general use or EM Pyro Crit for vape teams. You can also consider Attack Goblet for Bennett list teams. Substep priority is the same for any attack scaling damage dealer. As for energy recharge, I would recommend not going out of your way to build ER on Arlecchino and just be fine ulting every other rotation. ER subs are perfectly fine to get. Remember, you can't choose your artifact substats, but I wouldn't specifically build for them unless you want to see her pretty ult every rotation. Now let's go over her potential teams. 2 main factors affect Arlecchino's team building. First, as a pyro attack scaler with no inherent attack buffs in her kit, she really appreciates Bennett's attack buff from his burst, along with pyro resonance. Even though he doesn't heal and causes circle impact gameplay, the attack buff alone significantly boosts Arlecchino's damage. Is he 100% needed? Definitely not. Arlecchino has a lot of teams without him that will still perform well. However, Bennett's strength with Arlecchino is definitely something to consider when optimizing her teams. Second, Arlecchino's inability to heal heavily incentivizes defensive utility in her teams to make her gameplay more more comfortable and less risky for the majority of players. For this reason, shielders such as Zhongli or Toma, or characters to provide damage reduction and resistance to interruption such as Daya, Xingqiu, and Beidou are great characters to slot in. Now, if you're a more hardcore player looking to optimize Arlecchino's damage, then based on team DPS sheet calculations, her best teams use Bennett and won't have any defensive utility. And if you're up to the challenge, you'll be rewarded with theoretically more damage. For the majority of players, however, I think slotting in defensive utility will be the best option for that gameplay comfort, and these teams' damage are still top tier. In my perspective, Arlecchino has 3 main team archetypes: Mono Pyro, Vape, and Overload with Chevreuse. Yes, you can experiment with teams like Melt and Burgeon, but I don't think they are as strong or consistent as the other teams. I will cover most of her possible options here, but I highly suggest checking out the team section of Zajess' Arlecchino pre-release video if you want even more details on character options. For Mono Pyro, the theoretical highest damage team would be Arlecchino, Bennett, Xiangling, and Kazuha. This has no defensive utility though, so you can slot in someone like Zhongli to replace either Xiangling or Kazuha. Another great option is replacing both Xiangling and Kazuha with the double Geo core of Zhongli and Chiori. In terms of vape teams, there are a lot of options you can choose from. You can go for an over-vape team with the 4-star squad of Bennett, Xingqiu, and Fischl. You can go double Hydro with a shielder just like Hu Tao. You can go VV Vape with no defensive utility at all for her theoretical best vape team on paper. Or you can forget about the VV and replace Kazuha with a shielder for a more comfortable and practical Bennett vape team that is still very solid. You can also consider Farina vape teams as well, either with normal attacks or plunging with Shen Yun. These teams will be fine since each character's individual strengths can brute force anything. However, I personally wouldn't recommend pairing Arlecchino with Farina. Since Arlecchino can't be healed by the team-wide healer, there is less initial generation of fanfare stacks, and Farina's constant HP drain will make on-feeling with Arlecchino quite dangerous, as she will be at 50% HP for most of the time until the end, where you could potentially use Arlecchino's ult to heal. Still a workable team to brute force content, but Farina will have better synergy with other characters. Lastly, Overload teams with Chevreuse synergize quite well with Arlecchino, as Chevreuse can provide Kazuha level buffs at C6 with an additional attack buff with very easy uptime. And even with only C0 Chevreuse, these Overload teams can be quite good. You can slot in Bennett with a single strong Electro character like Fischl, or you can forget about Bennett and go double Electro, allowing you to slot in the Fischl Beidou pairing, allowing you to have defensive utility from Beidou's burst along with plenty of energy. One valid concern is the knockback of Overload, but with the boss focus of Abyss floor 12 and Arlecchino being able to easily weave in dashes with her normal attacks allowing her to chase enemies, in my opinion the knockback shouldn't be too annoying to deal with. To conclude this guide on Arlecchino, I wanted to share my analysis on her place in the meta in terms of overall strength and pool value. In the most general sense, Arlecchino is just another main DPS who wants to be on field, and there are a lot of characters like that in Genshin already. Compared to 5-star supports, my view on limited 5-star DPSs is quite simple. Pretty much all main DPSs, especially the more newly released ones, have strong teams that can clear floor 12 of Abyss just fine. Sure, some of them may have some upsides such as ease of play, but realistically all of them fulfill the same role and can do the job just fine. This is why I always recommend people to pick a character they like and build around them versus pulling strictly for quote meta reasons. Arlecchino is another one of these main DPS characters, but she does have a higher floor in terms of power because she is a more recently released character. Now if we zoom in more on Arlecchino's role, then she'll be competing with the other top limited 5-star Pyro on-fielders, Hu Tao and Linny. And in my opinion, all of them carve out their own niches by being the best in one of the main Pyro team archetypes. Hu Tao is the queen of Vape, Linny is the king of Mono Pyro, and Arlecchino is the queen of Overload teams. We don't have many Pyro on-fielders that can utilize Chevreuse well at the moment, but as I said already, Arlecchino synergizes very well with Chevreuse's buff, making her probably the best Pyro main DPS in Overload focused teams. Arlecchino's Mono Pyro teams are fine, but Linny's kit is just made for Mono Pyro since he gets so many buffs for it, making him the top of that niche. And lastly, in terms of Vape, I think Hu Tao is generally the better Vape carry compared to Arlecchino. Hu Tao is the charged attack carry, and since charged attacks have no ICD, she has more big hits that can be vaped compared to Arlecchino's normal attacks that have standard ICD. In addition, Hu Tao synergizes extremely well with Double Hydro and Farina based Vape teams, which are the most popular Vape teams at the moment. Arlecchino is good in these comps, but her Vape strength comes more into play in Vape teams with Bennett. But I think these comparisons with Hu Tao and Linny actually reveal Arlecchino's biggest strength as a character. Sure, Arlecchino is the best at Overload, but technically not as good as Linny in Mono Pyro and not as good as Hu Tao in Vape. But Arlecchino's Mono Pyro and Vape teams are still competitive with them and quite strong. She's not a carry that is focused on one team archetype, but works well in all three, giving her a lot of team options that are all strong. and you can't really say the same for the other two, for instance Hu Tao in Monopyro or Lini in Overload, and I think this versatility in teams is what makes Arlecchino a strong and valuable character. So, is she a good unit to pull? She doesn't completely power creep anyone and is by no means a must pull, but Arlecchino is one of the top DPSs you can get, and if you're looking for a solid main DPS with a lot of viable different teams, she can give you some good value out of your Primo Gems. And that's everything I wanted to cover about Arlecchino. I hope this guide and analysis was helpful to you all in giving you a better understanding about everything related to Arlecchino. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video and want to see more guides like this on future characters. And I wish you all the best of luck on your Arlecchino pools.